She was humiliated the moment she stepped into the training center. They laughed at her old shirt, called her an extra on set or a shell collector. An instructor joined in, yelling across the field, "No badge. Take off your jacket and prove it." A bulky trainee stepped forward, grabbed her collar, and yanked it down in front of the crowd. Then the entire camp fell silent, as the white snake coiled around a sword appeared on her back, the classified symbol of Ghost Viper. And when the head instructor dropped to one knee and saluted her as Commander Sarah, no one dared breathe. Sarah Walker stood in the middle of that dusty field, her brown hair hanging loose, her slender frame swallowed by a faded, oversized shirt. Her hands, rough and calloused from years of labor, stayed steady at her sides, even as the torn fabric of her collar hung limp against her shoulder. The Black Ridge Private Training Center was a fortress of steel and concrete, a place where the elite former military private security bodyguards for billionaires trained to be untouchable. But right then, every eye was on her. The air felt thick, like the world was holding its breath. Sarah's face didn't change. Her eyes, soft but piercing, moved across the crowd, taking in every smirk that had faded, every laugh that had died. The trainee who'd ripped her shirt, a hulking guy named Kyle, was backing away, his hands trembling like he'd just touched something dangerous. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the faint buzz of a distant generator. "Before we keep going, can you do me a small favor? Grab your phone, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. It means everything to share stories like Sarah's, stories that grab your heart and don't let go." All right, let's dive back in. Sarah had walked into Black Ridge that morning like she always did, her temporary janitor badge clipped to her belt, her supply bag slung over one shoulder. Her sneakers were scuffed, her jeans had a tear at the knee, and that shirt, too big, a little worn, made her look like she'd wandered in from nowhere. She moved quietly, her steps light on the polished concrete floors, her head down just enough to avoid attention. But in a place like Black Ridge, where egos were as sharp as the knives they trained with, she stood out. Not because she wanted to, but because she didn't fit. The trainees were all muscle and swagger, dressed in tactical gear or designer athleisure, their voices loud, their presence louder. Sarah was invisible until she wasn't. The first jab came early in the main training hall. A tall woman named Vanessa, a trainee with a glossy ponytail and a tracksuit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent, was leaning against a rack of dumbbells. Her friends, a tight clique of ex-military types, were laughing about something when Sarah walked by pushing a cart of cleaning supplies. Vanessa's eyes locked onto her and a slow, cruel smile spread across her face. "That outfit, is it from Wardrobe Props?" she said, her voice carrying across the room. The words were sharp, meant to cut, and they did. A few heads turned, and the laughter started low at first, then louder. A stocky guy named Mike, his biceps straining against his shirt, joined in. "Sorry, cleaning lady, you're in the wrong room. This is live training, not a TV shoot." The group erupted, their voices bouncing off the steel walls. Sarah was wiping down a bench, her movements slow and steady. She didn't look up right away. She set her rag down, folded it once, and then turned to face them. "I'm assigned to support the training grounds," she said. Her voice was soft, like she was just stating a fact, no anger or shame in it. But that only made Vanessa laugh harder. "Support? What, here to collect spent shells? Nobody's buying that outfit." Mike leaned forward, his smirk wide, his eyes glinting with something mean. "Yes, sweetheart, you look like you wandered in from a thrift store. You sure you're not lost?" The room was buzzing now, trainees pausing their drills to watch, some whispering, others grinning openly. Sarah's jaw tightened just a fraction, but she didn't say another word. She picked up her rag and went back to work, her hands moving like nothing had happened. But the mockery didn't stop there. Later that morning, Sarah was tasked with cleaning the locker room, a place thick with the smell of sweat and arrogance. As she scrubbed the benches, a group of trainees led by a wiry woman named Tara stormed in, their gear bags slung over their shoulders. Tara, known for her sharp tongue and relentless ambition, spotted Sarah and sneered. "Oh, look, it's the charity case," she said, tossing her bag onto a bench so hard it knocked Sarah's cleaning supplies to the floor. The spray bottle rolled, leaking fluid across the tiles. Tara didn't stop. "What's next? You gonna polish our boots? Or do you just like hanging around where you don't belong?" The others laughed, one kicking the fallen bottle toward Sarah like it was a soccer ball. Sarah knelt to pick it up, her hands steady but her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm doing my job," she said, her voice low. Tara stepped closer, towering over her. Your job. This is our space, not your playground. Get out before we make you. The group closed in their shadows, falling over her, but Sarah stood, her eyes meeting Tara's for a split second before she turned and walked away, leaving the spilled cleaner behind. Cruelty has a way of spreading, especially in places like this. By late morning, the jokes had followed her outside to the training field, a wide, dusty stretch of land dotted with targets, obstacle courses, and piles of spent casings. Trainees were running drills, firing rubber rounds, shouting commands. Sarah was there, sweeping debris near the sidelines, her supply bag at her feet. The sun was high, the air hot and dry, and the trainees were in their element, their voices carrying over the pop of simulated gunfire. That's when an assistant instructor named Greg spotted her. He was a wiry guy, mid-30s, with a buzz cut and a scowl that never seemed to fade. He was tight with Vanessa's crew, always looking for a chance to show he was in charge. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, "Hey, janitor! This is a secure zone. If you don't have a badge, take off the jacket and prove it." The trainees nearby stopped, their heads turning, sensing a show. Sarah straightened up, her hand resting on the broom handle. "I have a temporary pass," she said, her voice still calm, like she was explaining something simple. "I'm not supposed to." But Greg cut her off, striding toward her, his boots kicking up dust. "If you've got nothing to hide, strip the jacket. Or are you stealing someone's identity?" The crowd was growing now, maybe 20 trainees, their faces a mix of amusement and curiosity. Vanessa was there, her arms crossed, that same smug smile on her lips. Mike called out, "Yeah, let's see it. Prove you're not just some nobody sneaking in." Sarah's eyes flicked to him, then back to Greg. She didn't move. She didn't reach for her jacket. She just stood there, her expression unreadable, like she was waiting. As the crowd jeered, a new voice cut through, dripping with fake sympathy. It was Jenna, a trainee with a polished smile and a reputation for cutting people down while pretending to be kind. She stepped forward, holding a clipboard, her eyes glinting with malice. "Oh, honey, don't be shy," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you're really staff, you must have some skills, right? Why don't you show us? Pick up a training rifle, fire a round. Or are you just here to mop up our messes?" The crowd roared with laughter, some clapping, others shouting for Sarah to prove it. Jenna handed her a rubber band gun from a nearby rack, her smile never wavering. Sarah took it, her fingers closing around the grip, but she didn't lift it. She just looked at Jenna, her gaze steady, then set the gun down on a crate. "That's not my job," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Jenna's smile twisted. "Figures. All talk, no game. Go back to your broom, loser." The crowd's laughter followed Sarah as she turned away, her shoulders straight, but her hands clenched tight around the broom handle. That's when something shifted, subtle but undeniable. During a break in the drills, a trainee named Marcus, one of the quieter ones, was struggling to reassemble his training rifle after a timed exercise. The pieces were scattered on a table and he was visibly frustrated, his hands shaking. Sarah, cleaning nearby, paused and glanced at the table. Without a word, she stepped over, picked up the bolt carrier, and slid it into place with a single fluid motion. Then she aligned the gas tube and clicked the upper receiver shut, all in under 10 seconds. Marcus stared, his jaw slack, as she handed him the now complete rifle. "Try it now," she said, her voice soft, before walking away. The trainees nearby fell silent, their eyes wide. Vanessa, who'd been watching from a distance, froze, her water bottle halfway to her mouth. Nobody laughed. For a moment, the field felt still, like the air itself was holding its breath. But the mockery didn't stop, it got uglier. During lunch, Sarah was assigned to clear trays from the mess hall, a cavernous room packed with trainees. As she moved between tables, a group led by a burly trainee named Derek decided to have fun. Derek, known for his loud voice and cruel streak, grabbed a tray of half-eaten food and deliberately tipped it onto the floor, splattering sauce and rice across Sarah's path. "Oops," he said, his voice mock innocent. "Guess you've got more work now, janitor." The table erupted in laughter, and others joined in tossing napkins, straws, and bits of food onto the mess. Sarah stopped her tray, balanced in one hand, and looked at the pile. Her face didn't change, but her eyes darkened just for a second. "You missed a spot," she said, pointing to a stray fry by Derek's foot. The table went quiet, unsure if she was joking. Derek's face reddened. "Keep talking and you'll be eating that off the floor," he snapped. Sarah didn't reply. She just knelt, started cleaning, and kept her gaze on the ground, her silence louder than their taunts. Things took a turn during a weapons drill. A trainee named Carter Young and cocky fumbled his grip on a training pistol. A rubber round misfired, zipping toward the back of another trainee who'd tripped and fallen. The crowd didn't notice at first. They were too focused on Sarah. But she saw it. She was maybe 10 feet away, sweeping near a stack of crates when her head snapped up. In a single motion, she dropped the broom, swung her supply bag off her shoulder, and raised it just as the round came flying. The bag caught the bullet with a dull thud, stopping it inches from the fallen trainee's neck. The sound made a few heads turn, but by the time they looked, Sarah was already lowering the bag, her face blank like it was nothing. The fallen trainee scrambled up, confused, muttering a quick thanks before hurrying off. Nobody else seemed to catch the full weight of it, but a few trainees exchanged glances, their laughter fading for a moment. "What was that?" someone whispered. Sarah didn't answer. She just picked up her broom and went back to work. The moment passed, but it left a ripple. Some of the trainees started watching her closer, their eyes lingering on her hands, her movements. She wasn't just quick, she was precise, like someone who'd trained for years. But the cruelty didn't let up. That afternoon, during a group briefing in the lecture hall, Sarah was sent to clean the projector screen. As she worked, a trainee named Rachel, a former intelligence officer with a knack for public shaming, stood up and pointed at her. "Hold on," Rachel said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Why's the janitor up there? This is a classified session. She's probably taking notes to sell to some tabloid." The room burst into laughter, heads turning to Sarah, who was wiping down the screen. Rachel kept going. "What's in that bag of yours? Spy gear. Or just more rags?" The trainees hooted, some banging their fists on the tables. Sarah paused, her cloth still in hand, and turned to face the room. "I'm here to clean," she said, her voice steady. Rachel smirked. "Then clean faster and get out. You're distracting the real professionals." Sarah's hand tightened on the cloth, but she turned back to the screen, her silence cutting deeper than any retort. Then came a moment nobody expected. As the briefing ended, the projector flickered, displaying a grainy photo of a training exercise from years ago. It was a group of operatives in tactical gear, their faces blurred except for one. A young woman, her hair tied back, stood at the edge, her posture unmistakable. The room went quiet, as a few trainees squinted at the screen, then at Sarah, who was packing up her supplies. The resemblance was uncanny. Vanessa, sitting near the front, stood up, her face pale. "Wait, is that her?" She whispered loud enough for others to hear. Before anyone could respond, Sarah glanced at the screen. Her expression unchanged, and unplugged the projector with a quick, deliberate tug. The image vanished. She picked up her bag and walked out, leaving the room buzzing with questions nobody dared ask aloud. Greg, the assistant instructor, was still fuming from earlier. He'd taken Sarah's calm defiance as a personal insult, and now he was looking for a way to reassert control. He stormed over during a break in the drills, his face red, his voice loud enough to draw a crowd. "You think you're special, huh? Playing games with that bag. This is a secure facility, not a circus. Show us your pass or you're out." Sarah set her mop down, slow and deliberate, and turned to face him. "I showed it at the gate," she said, her voice even. "It's on my belt." Greg scoffed, stepping closer, his finger jabbing the air. "Not good enough. You could have stolen that. Take off the jacket, prove you're legit, or I'm calling security." The crowd was bigger now, trainees gathering in a loose circle, their phones out, some recording, others whispering bets on how this would play out. The harassment reached a new low the next day. During a live-fire simulation, Sarah was assigned to reset the target range between rounds. As she moved across the field carrying a stack of metal plates, a trainee named Ethan, a former sniper with a cruel streak, decided to make her the target. He loaded a training rifle with a low-velocity paint round and fired it at her feet, splattering neon green across her jeans. The crowd howled with laughter as Sarah stumbled, the plates clattering to the ground. Ethan reloaded and fired again, this time hitting her supply bag, paint dripping down the canvas. "Keep dancing, janitor," he shouted, egging on the others. More trainees joined in tossing empty water bottles at her, their cheers growing louder with each hit. Sarah stopped, her hands gripping the bag, paint smearing her fingers. She looked at Ethan, her eyes cold, and said, "You're wasting ammo." The crowd's laughter faltered, but Ethan's face twisted with rage. "Keep talking and I'll aim higher," he snapped. Sarah picked up the plates one by one and walked off her steps, steady despite the paint dripping down her legs. That's when another piece of the puzzle fell into place. During a routine equipment check, a trainee named Holt, the scarred veteran, was inspecting a crate of training gear when he found something odd, a small black device tucked under a stack of vests. It was a tactical comms unit military grade far beyond what Blackridge used. Holt's hands froze as he turned it over, noticing a faint engraving, a snake coiled around a sword. He glanced at Sarah, who was cleaning a nearby rack, her back to him. Without a word, he slipped the device into his pocket and walked away, his face hard. Later in the barracks, he showed it to a few trusted trainees, his voice low. "This isn't standard issue. If she's carrying this, she's not just a janitor." The others stared, their skepticism wavering, but nobody laughed. The air felt heavier, like a storm was coming. The crowd's cruelty peaked during a team-building exercise. Sarah was sent to deliver water bottles to the trainees who were split into squads for a mock mission. As she approached Vanessa's team, they turned on her like a pack. Vanessa grabbed a bottle from Sarah's crate and poured it over her head, the water soaking her shirt and hair. "There now, you're clean," she said, her voice vicious. The others joined in splashing more water, some spitting into the crate, others chanting, "Drown the rat." Sarah stood there, water dripping from her hair, her clothes clinging to her skin. Her hands trembled just for a second, but she didn't back away. "You done?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. Vanessa laughed, but it was forced, like she'd expected more of a reaction. The crowd kept chanting, but Sarah picked up the crate water sloshing over the sides and walked away, her soaked sneakers leaving prints in the dust. The trainees' laughter followed her, but a few, like Holt, watched in silence, their faces tight. Then came a moment that turned the tide. During a night drill, the camp's security system malfunctioned, locking down the armory. Trainees were scrambling, unable to access their gear for a timed exercise. Sarah, who'd been cleaning the control room, stepped to the console, her fingers moving over the keypad with a speed and precision that silenced the room. She entered a 12-digit code, her eyes focused, and the system beeped, unlocking the armory doors. The trainees stared, their complaints dying in their throats. Daniels, who'd been called in, watched from the doorway, his face unreadable. "How'd you know that code?" he asked, his voice low. Sarah didn't look at him. "I pay attention," she said, stepping back to her mop. The room stayed quiet as the trainees filed out, their glances lingering on her, some with awe, others with unease. That's when Kyle, the big trainee, pushed through, his face twisted with a mix of anger and excitement. He was a former Marine, built like a tank with a laugh that could shake a room. He'd been feeding off the crowd's energy all day, and now he saw his chance. "Fine," he said, his voice booming. "I'll do it myself, so this whole camp knows she's just trash." Before anyone could react, he grabbed the collar of Sarah's shirt and yanked it down hard. The fabric tore with a sharp rip, exposing her shoulder and part of her back. The crowd gasped, then fell silent. There, curling over her shoulder blades, was a stark white tattoo, a serpent coiled around the hilt of a sword. The Ghost Viper insignia. Kyle froze, his hands still clutching the torn fabric, his eyes wide. Vanessa's smirk vanished, her face going pale. Mike took a step back, his mouth half open like he'd forgotten how to speak. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Stop. That's the real Ghost Viper, Mark." "Holy hell." Sarah didn't move. She didn't pull her shirt up or try to cover the tattoo. She just turned her head slow and deliberate and looked at Kyle. Her eyes were cold, not angry but sharp, like she was seeing straight into him. "You dared strip someone who's killed to survive," she said, her voice low, each word heavy. Kyle stammered, I didn't know." She stepped closer, her gaze never wavering. "And that's the problem. The ones who don't know are the most dangerous. Not because they're strong, but because they're stupid." The silence was deafening. The crowd was frozen, their phones still raised, but nobody was recording anymore. They were just staring, trying to process what they'd seen. Holt, the veteran trainee, stepped forward, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Don't force her," he said. "I've seen that tattoo once before. If it's real, she was part of a unit no one dares name." The others turned to him, some scoffing, but Holt didn't back down. He looked at Sarah, and for a second something passed between them. Not recognition, but a kind of understanding. The tension was thick, like everyone was waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's when Colonel Daniels, the head instructor, appeared. He strode through this crowd, his boots heavy on the ground, and when he saw Sarah, he stopped dead. His eyes went straight to the tattoo, and his whole body seemed to stiffen like he was staring at a ghost. But the final blow came before Daniels could speak. A trainee named Lila, desperate to regain control of the narrative, grabbed a megaphone from a nearby table and turned it on, her voice blaring across the field. "Hey everyone, let's give a round of applause for the janitor who thinks she's a legend," she shouted, her tone mocking. "Come on, let's see that tattoo again. Show us your secret agent moves." The crowd hesitated, but a few laughed, egged on by Lila's bravado. She kept going, circling Sarah, the megaphone screeching, "What's next? You gonna tell us you're a spy? Or just cry and run home?" Sarah stood still, her torn shirt flapping in the breeze, her eyes fixed on Lila. She didn't speak, didn't flinch, but her silence was a wall, unyielding. Lila's voice faltered, the megaphone dropping slightly, but she pushed on, her words growing shrill. The crowd's laughter died as Sarah took one step forward, her gaze locking onto Lila's, and the megaphone fell silent. Daniels broke the moment. He dropped to one knee, his right hand over his heart. I was assistant instructor for Ghost Viper training in 2010, he said, his voice rough but clear. "I apologize for this insult, Commander Sarah." The entire camp froze. You could have heard a pin drop. "Commander Sarah." The words hit like a shockwave. Vanessa's hands fell to her sides, her face white as a sheet. Mike looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. Kyle was shaking now, his eyes wide, tears starting to form. Lila dropped the megaphone, her hands trembling, her bravado gone. Then Sarah sealed it. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a black card edged in gold with a faint embossed symbol that matched the tattoo on her back. She held it up not for show, but like it was a key she'd been waiting to use. "I'm the primary funder of this program," she said, her voice steady. "The trainee list has been updated. Anyone who humiliated another, leave now." The crowd didn't move at first. It was like they couldn't believe it. Then Kyle started to cry, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet sobs that made his shoulders shake. He tried to say something, maybe an apology, but Sarah didn't look at him. She turned away, her torn shirt still hanging off one shoulder, and started walking toward the main building. The trainees parted for her, nobody daring to meet her eyes. Vanessa was frozen, her hands clenched into fists, her lips trembling like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Mike just stared at the ground, his face red. Greg looked like he was going to be sick. He opened his mouth maybe to argue, but one look from Daniel shut him up. Lila was backing away, her megaphone forgotten on the ground, her face pale. The air was heavy, the kind of quiet that follows a storm. The consequences hit hard and fast. By the next morning, Kyle was gone, fired on the spot, his name erased from the program. Word spread that he'd been blacklisted from every private security firm in the country, his career dead before it began. Vanessa's sponsorship deal with a high-end gear company collapsed. The news hit social media, and people were tearing her apart online, reposting clips of her mocking Sarah. Mike's mentor, a retired general, dropped him, refusing to be associated with someone who'd crossed that line. Greg was demoted, reassigned to a desk job in a different state, his authority stripped. Tara's application for an elite security contract was rejected, her name flagged for conduct issues. Derek's gym, where he'd bragged about his Blackridge status, lost its funding after a viral video of the food-throwing incident surfaced. Ethan's sniper certification was revoked, his record marked with a disciplinary note. Rachel's intelligence firm dropped her, citing unprofessional behavior. Lila's social media accounts, where she'd posted about her leadership at Blackridge, were flooded with comments calling her out, her reputation in ruins. Sarah didn't linger to watch it unfold. She was back at work the next day, same oversized shirt, same quiet steps. But now people saw her, not because she asked for it, but because they couldn't help it. The way she moved, calm, deliberate, like she knew exactly where she was going, it was different now. Or maybe it had always been that way, and they'd just been too blind to notice. She didn't talk about what happened. She didn't need to. The tattoo, the card, the salute, they spoke louder than words ever could. A few days later, something else happened, something nobody forgot. It was a quiet afternoon, the field empty except for a few trainees running laps. Sarah was sitting on a bench outside, eating a sandwich from a paper bag, her supply bag at her feet. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the dirt. A black SUV pulled up, sleek and unmarked, the kind of vehicle that makes you look twice. A man got out, tall, broad-shouldered, early 40s, with short dark hair and a face that didn't give much away. He was dressed in a plain jacket and jeans, but the way he carried himself, you knew he wasn't just anybody. He walked straight to Sarah, and the few trainees nearby stopped, their eyes locked on him. He didn't say much. just leaned down, murmured something in her ear. She nodded once and handed him half her sandwich. He took it, sat beside her, and they ate in silence like it was the most normal thing in the world. Nobody needed to ask who he was. The way the air shifted when he showed up, the way Daniels, who happened to be walking by, straightened up and gave a quick nod, it was enough. This was her husband. And when he was there, the whole camp felt different, like the ground itself was holding its breath. Sarah didn't look at the trainees watching her. She didn't need to. She just finished her sandwich, brushed the crumbs off her hands, and stood up. Her husband stood too, and they walked to the SUV together, his hand resting lightly on her back. The way she moved steady, unhurried, her head high, said more than any speech could. She wasn't proving a point. She was just living her truth, and that was enough. The camp went back to normal, or as normal as it could be. Drills ran, trainees shouted, life moved on. But Sarah's story lingered. Trainees whispered about her in the barracks, instructors spoke her name in hushed tones. She wasn't a myth. She was real, and that made her bigger. The ones who'd mocked her, who'd laughed and jeered, they were gone, their names fading like dust in the wind. And Sarah. She was still there, sweeping the floors, carrying her bag, her tattoo hidden under that same old shirt. For the people who'd been judged their whole lives, the ones who'd been looked down on or told they didn't belong, Sarah's story hit deep. It wasn't about revenge or glory. It was about standing tall even when the world tries to knock you down. It was about carrying your truth quiet and steady until the moment it speaks for itself. You weren't wrong for believing in yourself. You weren't alone in your fight. And when the dust settles, the ones who tried to break you, they're the ones who fall. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.